Chapter 15 Waterway of Death. I began to plan to return to Texas. Nellie's death had upset me greatly, and my one dream was to see the loved ones I'd left so far behind. But there was work to be done, and I couldn't leave just yet. I thought I might go to South America, or even Brazil. I didn't know. But one thing was sure, I wouldn't spend any more months in Dakota. Before I left, other sorrows would befall me. About the 1st of May, 4 of us cowboys were camped in the Grand River near the wagon crossing. It was known as Blanket Camp, a double log cabin on the river I remember as a waterway of death when it began to blow in from the south. The snow melts and the creek and the rivers become rushing torrents. There had been a family camped near the river for several days, waiting for it to run drawn so they could cross. The morning we saddled our horses to leave camp, I noticed a family making preparation to leave. They had 5 children, ranging in the ages from 8 to 2 years. They were traveling in a big Studebaker wagon headed for some place in Wyoming. I became concerned about their moving out because they had to cross was a mean place. The river made a short bend just above and below, which caused the water to be rather swift at the crossing, and it was impossible to ford it when it had so much water flowing through. Besides, one of the old L7 hands and horse had drowned there a few years ago. That vicious current had probably claimed more lives than we knew about. The banks of the river on both sides below the ford were steep and high for miles. There was no crossing for cattle, for in the daytimes the water narrowed as it went to the high banks and deepened as it always stood several feet deep in water at its lowest side. As we approached the crossing on the north side, the wagon was going into the water on the south side. The wheels of that old wagon hadn't rolled for more than a few yards in the tide before swift currents started washing it downstream. The chill of the morning suddenly cut through me when I realized what was happening to the family, and I heard the little children crying out in fright. I felt helpless. I saw the team of 2 horses struggling desperately to keep a footing. The man was trying to frantically keep a hold of the lines, and I had seen what was going to happen to them before they reached the swimming water. Quickly I moved into action. I knew that unless the 4 punchers fought the mad river for those 7 lives, the family was surely doomed. I jerked off my coat and leaped from my saddle, and pulling my boots when I heard one of the boys yell, "No, Byrd! No use, Byrd! They're gone! They just went under!" When I stood, I saw the wagon team were being whirled around in a spewing current. By now, though, the wagon had been washed forward the north bank. The man had gotten to the team into calmer water where they might have swam out, only to have the wicked rivers sweep them once more towards death. "Boys, we'll try to save them," I said as I moved about, yanking my pants and chaps off. I could see the woman and her children peeping from the canvas cover of the wagon. I could stand it no longer. I sprang back into my saddle and spurred old Outlaw and headed him to the river bank at full speed, using my quirt with all my might under his flanks. I heard the boys yelling for me to stop, but paid them no mind. As Outlaw and I started over the edge of that steep high bank, he rose high in the air and made a desperate leap as we were trying to clear the stream, which was 150 yards wide at that point. I can feel yet the roll of him under me, and his large frame vibrating to the rhythm of the saddle. I see him again as he was on that day, horse flesh at its best. He sank lower and lower, head downward until he finally hit the ice-cold water with an awful splash and sank beneath the powerful waves. As I went to the bottom with him, the other boys were riding along, watching all of us fight in the mad stream. As my head sank under those troubled waters, I breathed a prayer for help and strength for those helpless children whose cries I hear yet. Outlaw came up, snorting from the cold and fright. I managed to steer him near the middle of the stream by slapping the water at his head with my hands. I guided him in the way to be sure not to duck him under by pulling his bridle bit. We were soon beside the wagon. Little hands reached out to me and shouted encouragement, orders to the man and the woman. The man was still fighting courageously to stay seated as the water kept swelling up towards him and beating him back. They were being swept down the stream fast. The women and children were clinging to the wagon bow and to strips of the tarp corner. Once more I heard the plaintive cry of those babies as death seemed absolute. I got madder than that river and said, "God willing, I will pull you folks from the clutches of this watery grave or die trying." I didn't know whether they heard me above the roar. I looked up and saw the hands walking the bank. The man, seeing me coming, had torn away from the front of the wagon cover so that his children could be reached easier. With his help, I was able to guide 2 of the children mounted behind me. I also took the infant in my arms and headed for the bank. Then I drifted downstream and gradually towards the north bank. When near enough, I yelled for them to throw me the end of the ropes, which they did. Each little form was soon dragged from strong arms to the top of the bank, and I was headed to the wagon box again. It was being carried at a terrific speed towards Big Missouri. After a good chase, I drew up beside it and got the woman up behind Outlaw and one out in front. She held one baby in her arms, and I saw my powerful horse was failing fast under the double burden of his weight. It was indeed taxed our strength to overtake the floating wagon. I swam with the man towards the bank and yelled encouragement to the woman and the little ones. "Hold fast! Be still!" I yelled over the water. I knew none of us would hold out much longer, but we were making progress. God was with us. The horse sank beneath the waves several times before he neared the bank. The waves kept lapping side and high. The outlaw was gasping for his breath. Water streamed from his nostrils. The woman was brave, for she never became hysterical. Blood soon began to flow from Outlaw's nostrils, and I steered the horse closer and closer to the bank. I had my rope, and it tied the end of the first rope till it came to the reach. This we looped around the woman's waist. The little ones followed. I took 2 strong men to pull her up to the high bank. I took the baby in my arms and waited until she was safe, and then the little one was lifted. I went back to my struggling horse. About the time the wagon team disappeared somewhere in the sharp bend of the river, my horse was drowning. He didn't have the strength to save himself. I tried to get my old saddle, but could not unfasten the cinches. He struck me with one foot and sent me to the bottom. I was so numb from the cold that I could hardly get the strength up to come back to the top. I made it to the bank, but by the time I got there, old Outlaw was gone too. I felt sick from grief, for I loved that horse. The boys dropped their ropes for me and dragged me up, safely, half dead. And those 7 faces came around me, and the little one's arms slipped around my neck. I knew Outlaw had died for a great cause. Family. We all went back to camp, dried out around the stove, and got acquainted. Mr. and Mrs. Weaver and their 5 little ones just kept gathering around me, but my horse and that cold bath put me to bed for a week. The boys made up a good-sized purse for the family since they had lost everything they owned. Mr. and Mrs. Hardy gave them use of the C7 team and wagon for their trip to Wyoming. As soon as I could, I went to town to buy a new saddle. Again, I felt strong inclinations to see my loved ones. I saw a paper while in Lemon which gave a fair account of what had happened, and gave us boys a good boost for our part in the rescue. To my way of thinking, Outlaw should have been the one who got credit. Nothing much was said about the loss of that fine animal. Mr. and Mrs. Hardy scolded me for taking such a leap on the horse. The bank was nearly 30 feet high above the water, and water nearly 20 feet deep or deeper. I had done the only thing I was ever known to do when I see someone struggling for life: jump in and help.